So hello, thank you so much for coming along this morning. This is the Charities Institute Fundraising London and South East Region's virtual first Thursday event, where we have the wonderful David Roberts taking questions on legacy fundraising. So my name's Julia Ellis, I chair the committee, and I would like to say a big thank you to all the CIoF First Thursday volunteers who've been busily beavering away behind the scenes. We're all dedicated to promoting excellence in fundraising, and there you go. That's us up on the screen now. We're currently recruiting for a number of roles. We're looking for a treasurer, a head of marketing, a head of recruitment, a head of regionalisation, and an event coordinator to help out at these events. So do consider joining us. We're a really friendly team and we're passionate about making a difference. So message me on LinkedIn or via the CIoF website. Anyway, back to today's event. Please do tweet about it and tag David at Funky Drums Dave, or more soberly at Bequeathed UK, and us at CIoF South East London. We will be recording this morning's event, so please do anonymise yourselves if you so wish. And finally, for those of you who aren't yet members of the Charities Institute, then just for attending today's session, I can offer you a discount code, which is LND/group. I'll repeat that. The slides seem to be having a mind of their own at the moment, by the way. I'll repeat the discount code is LND/group, which will give you a massive £49 off of your first annual membership. You'll have access to discounted rates of future events, including convention and training courses and qualifications, as well as members-only guidance and direct support from our policy team, plus a ton of other benefits. Okay, so I will now hand over to Julie Roberts, our head of events, who will run through how today's session is going to work. Julie.
Okay, so just a few house rules. So today, obviously, we're doing a full Q&A session with David. So please, can I ask if you could just use the Q&A function that is on the bottom for all of your questions? That would be marvelous. If you have any technical issues or need to reach out to one of us, please use the chat function. So that's the Q&A function for your questions and the chat function for anything else. We do already have loads of questions that have come through from David from your registration, so we will be piling through those. But if you do think of anything else or another question spurs you on to think about a different question, please do add it, and we will do our very, very best to get through as many questions as we possibly can. And finally, enjoy the session. Thank you, everybody. To you, Juliet.
Yeah, so I'll just do the introduction. So David Roberts has been involved in legacy fundraising for over 20 years. Goodness, it's a long time. And he's currently head of charity engagement at Bequeathed. Before that, he was Charities Engagement Manager for the Law Society. And in addition, he's been on the board of Jewish Legacy Giving since April 2013, and 5 years ago became one of their trustees. He worked with over 300 charities at the Law Society and has also worked on a few projects of small charities where he's helped plan and implement legacy marketing strategies. David's been a committee member for the CIoF Legacy and MEM Special Interest Group for 6 years and became co-chair of the group in 2019. So we reckon he probably knows his stuff. In another life, David was in a band that was part of an EMI project, which got to rehearse in studios with the likes of Finlay Key. No idea who he is, but I think I'm supposed to be impressed. And Delamici, who I have heard of. So apologies to the youngsters on the session. Anyway, one day, all 6 of them were tearing downstairs just as Mark Owing of Take That, I've heard of him, was coming up them. And David and his bandmates nearly killed him as they almost made him fall down 3 flights of stairs. How music history would have been different, David, had you succeeded in doing so.
Absolutely.
Coming out of lockdown, he's apparently most looking forward to theatre and live music and face-to-face CIoF networking events. I'm sure that's true. Anyway, we're delighted that he's given up his time to host today's session. So without further ado, I shall hand over to you, David. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Juliet. Well, hello everyone. Good morning. Glad you can join us all this morning, and thank you for all the questions which have been sent in advance. I was going to do an introduction myself, but I think Juliet did that for me. So really, she sort of explained little bit about myself. So just to reiterate, I have been doing legacies for a long time, and do have the privilege of working with hundreds of charities on a daily basis. So it's always good to do that. But without further ado, I am happy actually to take any questions privately as well. So if anyone's got any issues they want to discuss or wants to get in touch, the contact details were shared or there at the end. But I think Stephen was going to be chairing, if you like, and asking the questions that had already come in, and we can start a little discussion going.
Absolutely. So in that case, we'll get started straight away, David. So there are lots of questions, guys. So like David said, if there is anything additional, please put it in the chat, or David is willing to share. So David, first one is around strategy. So when is the best month to run a legacy campaign?
That's a very good question. Lots of people do like to theme it around certain months of the year when there's lots of noise being made around legacies. So a lot of noise is made around legacies around September time, when Remember a Charity hold a Remember a Charity week. And for those of you who know Remember a Charity, they're a consortium of around 200 charities who basically promote the idea of making legacies the norm and the social norm, and getting solicitors to talk about legacies all the time, as well as the general public thinking about leaving it in a will. Now, you don't have to be a member to make noise around that time. They'll probably, hopefully no one from Remember Charities on there, and I didn't just hear me say that, but you can just make lots of noise through social media platforms and stuff around legacies then. But in all honesty, there is really no time which is better than any other to run a legacy campaign. You should really be doing it all year round, and whenever you want to talk about legacies, talk about legacies. It's something that can be constant from start to finish. Pretty much every single day you can drop legacies into conversations. You can drip feed the message is the key to really getting legacies brought into your charity.
Thank you, David. I really appreciate that. So I'm hoping everyone can hear me okay. So someone's saying that they're struggling to hear me, so apologies about that. But what I will try and do is get some of the questions into the chat function so you can see them as well. So next question, David, is what would be your top tips for a small charity embarking on a legacy promotion strategy?
So a lot of small charities think that it's quite hard to start engaging with legacies and talking about legacies in their organizations, but really it's something that can be very easy for them and very easy to do. The best way to go about starting any sort of legacy strategy is to start contacting your warm supporters first. And with your warm supporters, if you've got a supporter base, doing a little DM piece, doing something in a newsletter, just talking about the idea of possibly giving a gift in your will to them would help a lot. It's just the mention of saying, did you know you could leave us a gift in your will? Did you know that leaving a gift in your will could do X, Y, Z for the organization and would help you in the future? And the good thing about legacy giving is it's not something that has to be done here and now. So there used to be an old myth many years ago that you had to be really rich or a high net worth individual to be even capable of leaving a gift in your will to a charity. That's what people would like to have, and they'd like the big estates, obviously, and the big residuaries left over. However, even £100 left in a will is still a gift and can still do something useful for your charity. So my advice to any small charity would be just start talking about leaving a gift in your will to you and how you go about it. And that could be just as simple as go to your local solicitor. If you have a free will scheme, go to the free will scheme. There's several ways you can do it. It's just very simple, drip feeding the message, just constantly talk. And another good way is to get anyone else who's representing your organization to talk about the idea of leaving a gift in their will to you. There's nothing better like having a volunteer or a chief executive when they're talking about the charity saying, I've left a gift in my will, you could do too. Now, even if that top level person has just put £1 in the will, it doesn't matter. If you can make a case study around the fact that someone in that position has left a gift in the will, they've done it, they know it, they're almost preaching to the converted, so to speak, so people will follow suit. And interestingly, there was some research that was done as well recently that said that if you write to a supporter or you write to an audience and mention the idea of leaving a gift in a will, they are 17 times more likely to do so. And that was quite an interesting stat as well. So the more you talk about it, the more it gets known, you generally will end up with someone possibly potentially pledging to you in their will.
Fantastic, thank you. Great feedback there. So next question. Someone's asking that they work for a professional membership organization. What's the best way to introducing the topic of legacy, of leaving a legacy? And are they right in thinking that it's best in specific emails or letters dedicated to this rather than in a regular newsletter or update letter?
In my opinion, I think a combination of both would be quite good. The fact you're a professional member body means you've got some buy-in to your organisation and what you do anyway. I suppose it depends what type of organisation you actually are. If you're a regulator, like when I was at the Law Society, most solicitors hated the fact they had to be members of the Law Society. And if you would phone them up and talk to them, say from the Law Society, they'd say, what have I done wrong? Because I thought they were in trouble for something. But it really depends on sort of the relationship that you have with and what type of professional membership body you are. I think it's a good audience really, because if it's a membership body because someone wants to be a member, then they've already some warmth and they feel some sort of pride in being a member of that organization. So writing to them saying that we're a membership organization, we're also a charity to fund what we do and all our research, or whatever we're doing, whatever our specialization, whatever our services are. By doing that, you know, you've got this this audience that might be warm to the idea of saying, oh, I didn't even know I could leave a gift in my will. How do I go about doing this? Oh, well, here you go, how? So you could just use a letter, or just in their monthly, if there's a monthly magazine or a monthly newsletter or monthly emails that go out. Again, the key is that drip message of it is like, have you thought about leaving a gift in the will? Do you want to find out more information? Contact us here. Something as simple as that is a good way to start engaging them. And once they're engaged, you're either going to get them warmly coming back to you and asking you for more information, or you've got the opportunity to say, actually, you know what, this communication could be specifically a DM piece about leaving a gift in your will, or it could be that you put it into another ask. You might be doing a capital fundraising campaign, you might be doing a campaign on something or other, at the end of it having this little thing to say, please send me more information about how I could leave a gift in my will. And then with that, you can go forwards. And I remember a similar sort of situation with this scenario where when I was doing something for Jewish Legacy, I was doing a workshop on top tips for building a legacy strategy. And a lot of the Jewish charities have certain festivals of the year where they do a appeal each year. So they've got a big, massive community appeal going out for a specific cause. And I said to them, do you ask for donations on it? And usually have a tip box saying you can donate £100, £200, £10, whatever. And they're like, yes, with a reply slip. Why don't you add a line in and say, did you know you could also leave us a gift in your will? Would you like to find out how? Tick here. And they say yes. So obviously they had that reply, they had that consent for someone wanting to be contacted for it. And so someone did that and had quite a good response from it. What they did realize was afterwards, they said, they got this response and realized, hold on, we've got nothing to actually send them or nothing to do. So they've gone all gun blazing saying, yay, let's ask for how we can leave a gift to us and everything. Started getting this interest for some inquiries and basically ended up with nothing to send them back. So the next stage was, right, now let's build something to give back to them. So it always works. So as soon as you as soon as you get some sort of messaging across, always have something in the background to give back.
Great, fantastic. And David, this question actually follows on quite nicely. So someone's asking, what might the timescales and milestones look like for starting from scratch for legacies for a charity that is between 1 to 3 million? So kind of a mid-sized sort of charity.
Yeah, it's a very interesting question. It's a hard one to say with timescales for legacies, especially because as a general rule, the end result is you've got to be prepared that you could be waiting 20 years, you could be waiting 30 years. It all depends on your supporter base and sort of the age groups that you're targeting as well. Research shows that from a final will, you'll usually receive a gift in 3 to 7 years on average. Now, that can vary as well, because unfortunately sometimes someone has sorted out their affairs and might have a terminal illness and be on death's door, and something might happen a lot sooner. But as a general rule, it can be quite timely. So it's an investment about building the message. I mean, it doesn't really matter what size charity you are. You could be a charity with £5,000 income, and you could have a supporter base of like 500 people who could potentially be potential legators. So I think the income size doesn't really matter. It's really about what you want to invest in promoting it and talking about it. But timescale wise, I think basically, if you're a brand new charity, then I personally, in my opinion, would say you might have to wait a bit till you've established a bit of a supporter base. But if you're a 3, 4, 5-year-old charity, already have quite an established individual giving program and have a established sort of database, then I think you're in a good position to sort of start rolling out some legacy messaging and things, and then starting to think about getting legacies. It all depends on what your charity is. So that's quite a hard question to really put a number on about how long it takes. But I mean, ideally, depending on what you're doing, everyone would want, if you can't actually get physical pledges or the money coming through, it's always good to know some notifications that there's potential future legacies coming, and then it goes into the realms of stewardship and how you look after those people, assuming they've told you they want to leave a gift in their will and become that warm legacy prospect for you.
Great, thank you, David. And just going back, so there's some questions that are coming on the chat side as well. So you mentioned around the stats around 17 times more likely to give a donation. Where was that from, David?
It's a very good question. I heard it on an event similar to this the other week. It was some piece of research. What I'll do is I'll look up where the research was, and I'll ask the guys to send it out to the participants at the end of it. I could go now and just search out on the computer. I can't remember exactly which piece of research it was, but it was I think it was done either a year or so ago or a couple of years ago. But it is widely available. But I'll get the link posted out to you for that particular research.
Fantastic. And just sticking with the live chat for a moment, David, there's a few coming in. So someone's asking, is there any advice for charities who may be nervous around attributing a long-term ROI through legacy activity? Obviously, with free will guides, you can track costs per engagement, but won't necessarily convert, or could be a long time, before actual conversion.
Yeah, it's it's just a bit of a how long is a piece of a string when it comes to legacies. It's all about pipelining. I suppose a mistake that often happens with financial directors and some trustees within organizations is they work for an organization who luckily might have had a nice legacy left to them, and suddenly it comes through. And so for that year's income figures and voluntary income, suddenly it could have increased a lot from what it normally is. And then trustees and FDs get excited and think, brilliant, so now we're going to get this every single year. Not necessarily. You could have a year where you get like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pounds through a legacy and not. I think basically what we really have to do is you just have to get internal buy-in really to get around that, and to build the pipelines, you have to really just sort of, make sure that everyone's on board saying, look guys, we've got our individual program where we have the donations here and now. This is something that's going to ensure our future. The more we talk about it, the more likely people are going to realize they can do it, and then it's going to come through. And when it does, you've got a few more years left on the services that your charity are doing. Again, a lot of these sort of timescale questions are very, very, very hard to answer. I mean, there are some charities who are lucky enough to have increases year on year on year on year, especially if they had well-established campaigns. But I think my only advice would be to even get anywhere near that is to start doing, if you're not doing it now, start talking about it before you miss out. It's a bit of a FOMO type of thing, really, because the best audience at the moment is the baby boomers, and they're starting to die. They are the, I think I've got this right, they are asset, either cash poor and asset rich or something or other, but whatever it is, basically they are the wealthiest generation and the best prospects at the moment to reach out to. So that baby boomer generation is the ones you really want to hit before you die out. But then of course, once you've got them in place, it's their families that can continue it, who might want to carry on their own legacy of their own relative, and then they might want to be engaged with the charity as well. And then you've got a whole new line to steward as well and follow on. And in memory, fundraising plays a big part in this as well. If you've got people who are donating money in memory of someone, they could be a good potential legacy prospect as well coming forward for you, because if you've got that engagement with them, they remember the person, they want to do something to remember them. Why not do something even more for the future by themselves leaving something in their will for when their time comes, even if they're not in a position to do something now. And it's about just protecting that future income. So in a long and round way, hopefully that answered the question. I sort of semi forgot what part of it was, but if not, forgive me for that.
Yeah, I'm sure we can get some through. So, so someone's asking, what are the fundamental components you need to launch a legacy program from scratch?
So, ideally, in my opinion, the best route would be you know, start talking to your warm supporters in your internal database, start engaging with them. The top 10 simple things really to do to start from scratch are put something in a newsletter about legacies, put something on your website, just keep mentioning the word, leave a gift in your will, leave a gift in your will, what you could do, put a few case studies in there. Start with that audience, then start widening that a little bit more. Then you can go down a cold route. Once you know you've got some engagement and you've had some success with people responding to you, then you can start going to a more colder audience. And then something like free will schemes could work quite well for that as well, because it's a call to action. So you've almost saying, right, okay, leave a gift in a will. So how do I leave a gift in my will? Well, we happen to offer a will service for you. You can write your will with us for free. Then you've got a built-in legacy prompt for that. So it's just basically start from scratch. But my main advice to everyone, and over the years, especially when I was at a law society, was I had people who would call me up and say, we've got X amount of money, we want to spend it all with you to put into your directory to go to solicitors. I would turn around and say, no, you don't. Why would you want to spend all your money with that without even talking to your supporters first? And they're like, oh, that's a good point, actually. So they started doing newsletters, they started doing things. Then you can start going to your more colder audience, but it's more about look at what you've got and look at who your best prospects would be here and now, and then just start mentioning it to them. And you can do it very, very, very loosely off the cuff. You really don't need to worry too much about what you're saying. It could be just a little, almost like it's that key message again, drip, 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 the idea of leaving a message, put it into conversations, put it into anything else. Just don't be afraid to talk about the idea.
Fantastic. Thank you, David. So there's another good question here. It's what is the best way to engage non-fundraising staff, in particular staff delivering our services, on sharing gifts in wills messages?
So this is quite an interesting topic, because there's it's always great. You always need internal buy-in to talk about legacies. So what a lot of organizations do is they have internal awareness weeks about legacy giving. And what they do is they do sort of it's almost like a sort of a lunch and learn or a internal training session or something, where they run a little mini event internally where they might play a game like a quiz or something, and it's a bit of fun-filled staff team building sort of event. And there's ones like there's one sort of event which has been going around for a while called Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, and it's based on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, and you go through the stages, but the questions are all about gifts and wills and what they can mean, and sometimes it's tailored to the organization, sometimes it's tailored generally, and it's just a bit of fun. There's other things you can do. It's basically just workshopping it. Basically, it's just invite the staff along, just talk to them, just tell them that it's very easy to do. Then if you've got a supporter experience team, for example, if they're talking to someone about something else and they want to know about services you offer, if you've got a free will scheme, you can chuck that in as, oh, by the way, we have a free will scheme. That's a nice way to start talking about legacies. Or you could say, yeah, you could also leave a gift in your will. It's just basically making them aware they don't have to be scared of it. And there was a piece done, I think it was back in, must have been like 2007 or something. NSPCC really pioneered the art of conversation and having legacy conversations amongst their staff. And in fact, it went to an extent where they actually set KPIs for their teams, all their teams, to actually see how many legacy conversations they could have with supporters and how many times they could get legacies dropped in. And another example was there was Cystic Fibrosis Trust, previous legacy fundraiser there. He ran a little competition where every time someone mentioned legacies, they have a competition, and who had the most at the end of the month, the person who had the most would get a nice mug, a cystic fibrosis mug or something to have their tea in. Of course, this is going back to the days when everyone was in offices and not stuck at home and things where people were together. But it's just little things, little incentives to the staff just to talk about it and different things. And it's all about conversation. It's just saying, okay, if you can't do something now, do you know you could do this? And it's a bit like selling, really. Fundraising is a little bit of a sales pitch generally anyway. Obviously for a good cause, rather than like the older 1980s double glazing salesman. You wouldn't go down that route of trying to fundraise, but it's all about getting the message and making people really feel for what the charity does and actually parting with that cash. And legacies has always been a good way for doing that in the future if you're not in a position to do it now. And that was one of those myths that were busted originally, because everyone used to think, oh, I have to be really rich or have £1 million house to even contemplate giving a gift in the will.
Great, thank you, David. And actually following on nicely from that, someone's asking your advice that you might have around engaging the services of an online will writer.
Okay, I will be unbiased here, considering I do actually work for a will writing company. Basically, there is definitely use for it. Things are moving online now. All of the providers out there for will providers out there are different in their own way and all do different things. So you have some sole online providers. And what I say to every charity who ever talks to me about wills is, as a charity, you need to decide what fits best for you and for your supporters and for your needs. So, for example, without going into too much detail or doing any sales pitch, this is not going to be a sales pitch. How Bequeathed, for example, differs to an online only provider is we now work with solicitors as well and have solicitors firms. So every single person who writes a will with us also gets a 30-minute appointment with a legal professional at the end of it to make sure that everything's been met, everything's been needed. And what that does lead to is, if someone has a more complex circumstance, it's already identified, because none of the will services will provide for a complex estate. It's a standard or simple will is what you'll be doing on all these services. Usually, if there's any more complex needs that someone will have, is you will have to pay for that. Now, charities generally don't pay for that. It would be between the supporter and the legal professional in the end. And so what it's doing, so what our service does, for example, is it gives you a 30-minute appointment completely free to get a free will. But others are like, you can go through the will, you could do it in 10, 15 minutes, half an hour, however long it takes, and you've got your will. It really depends on what's right for you and what's right for your organizations.
Fantastic. Thank you, David. So David, just going back to obviously the pandemic and everything that's going on at the moment. So someone's asking that the Markham Comms team are currently a bit nervous about promoting legacy giving, especially during the pandemic. Any thoughts about how to win them over?
Yeah, this has been a really big topic for the last year or so. I know that back right at the beginning of the pandemic, a lot of charities decided to pull the campaigns they were doing at the time, and for quite right reason as well. No one knew what was going on and things. There were some charities who did take the plunge and say, actually, do you know what? We are still going to go with it. We've booked it. We've got the time. We're going to do it. We can't see anything. I think as long as you're not saying to people, you're going to die, so give us your money, then you're all right, and you have to have a more sensitive approach to it. But if you go to if for example, one of the best ways to promote during the pandemic is if you have some sort of will service, because with that you can still keep legacy messaging out there in a sensitive way, but you can do it in a way that you're providing a service to your supporters, to your service users, to whatever your organization does. And what I mean by that is you don't have to go outright saying a gift in your will mean that you blah, 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 etc. could do X, Y, Z for us for this. You could say, did you know we have a free will service as well as one of the many services that we offer you. Take advantage of it by clicking here or by visiting here or by doing this. And it's sort of a nice way to sort of introduce it. It really depends on, in terms of buttering the Marcoms team up as well, it's, as long as you're not going too blatant with it, I'd say just try and keep some very sort of low messaging, just consistent messaging. Maybe if you had a full campaign, maybe tie it in with something else. It really depends charity to charity, and it depends on what your views are generally as well as a charity and what your beliefs are. If you've been told literally cut advertising or cut any promotion for legacies at the moment, in my opinion, I think that's possibly a wrong move, but you know what, it's up to how the charity feels about it. A lot more charities now are back promoting legacies quite regularly, so I think just follow suit really, and you know what's best for your charity really, and how each one works.
Thank you, David. You mentioned case studies a little bit earlier. Do you think that leaving legacy stories are better than stories of those who have already died?
It's an interesting way of asking a question. I think it's a mixture of both. I think in terms of case studies, generally what I mean by case studies is to say that you could say it's a memory piece, if you like, about my mother. Before she died, she wrote that I wanted to leave to charity X in my will, and it's the story of why she did that, and her story with it's about storytelling, and it's about really, you know, what has that person, what's the connection to the charity, why did they do it, the reasons why. A way around it, rather than talking about someone who's already died for a case study, is, I mentioned a little bit earlier, is to get someone senior in the organization to leave a gift in the will to the charity, because there's nothing more like saying, I've done it and this is why I've done it. Now, to get that person to do it, if you're a charity, you might feel a bit uncomfortable going to your chief exec, for example, and saying, leave us a gift in your will to us, and they'll be like, well, why should I? It's going to cost me too much money. As I said before, it doesn't matter if it's £1 or if it's £1 million that's being left. It's the fact they have written in a gift in the will means they are in a place to say, do you know what? I've done it, so why don't you? It's that sort of thing. It's that sort of state study thing it's saying, and it's also about showing how easy it is to do, and that all you have to do is you go to your solicitor, you go to the will scheme, you go to whatever, you write your will. This is the type of gift you can leave, and this is what it will do. The important part of the case studies is this particular gift meant that we were able to do X, Y, and Z for the next 10 years or whatever. or we're a university, someone left us a gift that's enabled us to build a whole new research lab for something or other. It's that type of thing. It's just a case study based on what the gift actually does, and that sort of messaging sort of hits home with people and is the sort of thing that will make people consider doing it. And sometimes as well, if there's an emotional connection to it as well, then someone might be emotive about that, and they might think, actually, do you know what, why not? I mean, one of the projects I did was for a small university, which was actually based in Israel. It was the UK office. So it's going to alumni, and this particular university was really big in developing scientific equipment and things. And one of the things that came out of the university was the USB memory stick, the flash drive sticks that everyone uses. So they invented that, and that became a worldwide thing. Now they also do things like that police lady who was paralyzed, who had that sort of robot suit thing to help her walk in. They developed that as well, that type of thing. So I set up a campaign for them, which was based to their supporters saying, this is our legacy, why not make it yours? So showing these things that they've done to help other people do these things, and it had quite a successful connection to it. So it's about that, and it's through telling a story that, look what we've done. This is by leaving a gift in your will, you can help continue this, and this will help more people down the line, because we'll come up with more things like that. And it's that type of sort of approach that you could use, and it's through a case study or a story that you can do that.
Great, thank you, David. And someone's asking, just going back to when you were mentioning about the top 10 tips for starting a new legacy campaign from scratch. So someone's asking, is there a need for certain forms, fact sheets, and other information in maybe print as well as online to make sure you capture all of those supporters?
Yeah, I think the best thing really for the top 10 is to have information on how you actually leave the legacy. And that can be online, it could be a downloadable PDF, it could be put in a magazine, it could be you could put, sorry, I got distracted by a thing popping up just now. Comment. Yeah, so you could put the forms in like a Q&A, how to do it, and just make it available. But lots of charities also have a legacy pack, which they'll send out. So that's sort of the good printed format. So especially if you're using a tick box type thing for more information, that's a good thing to just send them with all the information they need on how to leave a gift in their will.
Great, thank you. And someone's asking, are there any media channels that you feel should be off limits from a legacy perspective, e.g. receiving personalized DMs, direct messages, sorry, considering your death and could cause offense?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I think really you just go for all the time. I mean, a lot of legacy messaging now has gone on to things like Facebook and social media advertising, but more often than not, it's based around some sort of free will offer. And they seem to be the best call to actions for those sorts of social media platforms, if you like, and for promoting a legacy message through all channels. It's because really you're writing them with a purpose, and you're giving something back to your supporters. Really, so it's a good thing for people to through that there's a direct click, you go through, you've got that call to action, and at the end of the day, with no will there's no legacy. So it sort of kills two birds with one stone, and you basically end up with that particular link to that call to action, basically.
Great, thank you. And someone's asking a question around suggestive wording. They've been advised that wording is not recommended, suggestive wording is not recommended by solicitors and can cause problems, but they've seen it a lot done in the industry. I'm assuming that's about when making, when putting out material around legacies. So what would your advice be on that?
Yeah, I mean, it really depends on how you're doing it. A lot of people used to say suggested wording for your will is blah 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 thing. Nowadays most of it is automated anyway, so I don't think the suggested wording bit is so relevant, especially if you're working with someone on a will scheme of some kind, you wouldn't need to worry about that because all that would have been taken care of you. But it really depends on who the audience is, and it depends on what the relationship is with the supporter, because if you've got a supporter who may be a bit elderly, may need a little bit of hand holding, but wants your advice on how to do it, then in my opinion there's nothing wrong still by saying, well, this is a suggested wording. The likelihood is they will probably be going to their solicitor to write a will. They might not use online, they might, depend on how computer literate it was. One good thing about the pandemic has been that a lot more older people are now a bit more not so scared of technology and online more and doing things online more, or it might be now done by telephone because the face-to-face element as well has gone a little bit. But I would say really I think that's an age-old debate. It's the same debate as well. Should will be a capital W or a small w? There isn't really an answer for it. It's really what sits well with you. So it's basically up to what you feel is best. Maybe sitting on the fence a bit with this one, but it's completely up to what works best for you and what messaging you want to put across. But yeah, there's always going to be debate, and there's always going to be someone who's really happy with this, and there's always going to be someone who's not. It's a bit what's that platform which is always fun to read? Oh, TripAdvisor. It's a bit TripAdvisory. You're always going to get someone who moans, and you're always going to get someone who's like, yeah, it's brilliant. So it's always going to be that age-old question.
Fair enough. So someone's also asking, and since you're the expert in this area, can you expand on the will writing service and how it works? Are supporters obliged to leave a gift to the charity and paying for the wills? And then actually another question from somebody else actually links in nicely to this, and what would there be a minimum that you would ask people to leave in their wills in a legacy pack?
Absolutely not. There's charity commission guidelines and also fundraising code guidelines as well, which sort of stipulate when you're working with suppliers for wills or offering service. One of the things is you shouldn't be advising a member of a charity or a representative of a charity should not be advising anyone what to do in their will. All you should be for that bit about you said about a certain amount, what you can do is you can say, if you left a gift in your will for say £5,000, then that £5,000 would do X, Y, and Z. That's absolutely fine. But really, what most people do is say one of the age-old things that's been said has been they've used the 1%, leaving a gift of 1% of your estate in your will will do something for the future. And also that's sort of putting a bit of a percentage on it, basically. So you're not actually saying bang, 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 let's do this, let's do that. And you should always give someone the get out. You should always say, so especially with a free will service, you're under no obligation to do so. Is another charity commission and fundraising code guidance as well, is basically always give them a get out from doing it. But yeah, I mean, you can always paint pictures to represent what certain gifts might do in certain levels. It really depends on what type of gift you want. Most charities would prefer a residuary of an estate. And also it's one of those things as well for a residuary, is one of those areas where it's a variable amount, because the key messaging is, after you've taken care of your friends and family, why not consider leaving a gift to your favorite charity? And then what's left over after all the debts have paid, everyone else has been taken care of, it might be that there's only £5 left. It might be that there's half a house left. So yeah, we've got really differing amounts. So it could be that, saying I want to give 5% of my estate to charity or residuary of the state could be equivalent to, if everything's all okay, something like £250,000 or something. Thank you very much, I'll take that. And that's sort of what most charities would go for. But then sometimes some people want a gift in their will for specific things and want people to have a specific gift that they might want to give. So it might be like, actually, you know what, if you gave £5,000, if you do this, if you do that. So yeah, my advice would be always avoid sort of putting figures in. Just, always have the get out question as well, that you're under no obligation to do so.
Great, thank you, David. And this is an interesting question, actually. Is it better to put the legacy pack behind a phone number, email address, so we know if someone's interested, or is it better that it's just out there with less barriers in the way?
I would say a bit of both. I would say give both options. Is download now, because you just want someone to have the information there and then, but you also want someone to contact you, so you've got a bit more awareness of them. So I know GDPR made things a lot more complicated for people with these opt-in type things, but at least with asking that they're requesting the information. But I would always suggest as well, on your web page or on your anything else, always make it personal. Always put a name, and rather than a Legacy's email address, I always think it's nicer to say, please contact David at Bequeathed, or whoever, or Stephen at Autism Together, or wherever it is you work now. I know it's autism something. but you know what I mean. But yeah, it's that type of thing. So it's like you say, okay, so you are actually speaking to someone. There is someone who's actually going to help me. And again, it's about that relationship building as well. So my advice would be, yeah, you can have both. There's nothing wrong with downloading it. And it also depends, if it's part of a campaign, then it would be that someone would have contacted you for it and you'd have their details. So it's always good to for further stewardship.
Great, thank you. And so this question from partiality reasons, you may not want to answer it, so if you don't want to, but someone has asked the question directly, David. So how do you select the best free will partner?
As I said before, it's about what your needs are. Each one does things very differently. Research them all, do your due diligence on them all. You will know what sits right with you. Look at what after services you'll get as well, possibly look at experience as well in the sector as well. It depends what you want from your provider and your supplier. If you just want something simple which is just there in the background, that's fine, but just do your due diligence. Everyone has their own quirks, everyone has their own things. We all do different things, otherwise we wouldn't be in the marketplace. But it's always down to what sits best with you. Sometimes it's as simple as cost. Sometimes it's it's something else, but it really is do the due diligence basically, and you will know from talking to each and every supplier who works best and who's going to give what will work best for your needs and your supporters' needs. And that's all I can say on that one, really.
Thank you, Dave. Appreciate that. So someone's asking, is setting up and promoting some kind of designated fund for legacies a good way of trying to avoid legacy gifts that are too restricted?
Possibly. It's that's a very interesting question. In all honesty, I think we've been doing some work with some universities, and universities often get a lot of restricted gifts left to them. And what we have done on our platform is we've devised a way where someone's intention will always be looked after, but always in favour of the institution. So if someone wanted it to be specific for a certain product or a certain project, if that project doesn't exist, something's written into the will in the way that we've done it to make it be that if that can't happen, the funds can be released for general purposes as well. So it's always very hard to answer that particular. I think a higher education institution person might be able to answer that a bit better than me. And I think I did see someone on the list of participants who might know that. Should I name it? No, I'll leave her alone. But there's someone that I saw in the participants today who works for university. It might be able, but there is a if you are in that particular type of institution, there is a group of legacy fundraisers that you can join, which is specifically a higher educational group of fundraisers who talk about all these issues and stuff as well, which might be worth looking into joining.
And if that person does want to put themselves in the chat and open themselves up, then please feel free to do so, I suppose. So what are the useful ways, what are useful KPIs to use in the early stages of developing a legacy campaign?
Very good question. I think really it's how many sort of inquiries you get. So if you're doing things to get people to inquire about like pack requests, for example, legacy pack requests, if you're doing a sort of a free and form thing, if you're saying how more information on legacies, always that sort of inquiry. If there's people phoning in saying, am I able to give a legacy page stats on your web page? How many of these can you get? It always starts from the inquiry thing. And then of course the next level of KPI is actually how many notifications you've had as well. So how many previous legacies have come in, or how many legacies you're getting as well. But another good KPI is what I said before, is having a so I think one of the people I was pinpointing has just put something on what was I saying? Oh yes, KPIs. Yeah, is also having like internal KPIs about things like how many times you mention the legacies, how many times you have a conversation about legacies. So it's really hard to give actual KPIs on legacies. I think really the end goal is the actual money coming through and having gone through probate and stuff. But it's what you do to go that it's really a set your own sort of agenda. Is like, do we think that if we had 20 inquiries this year, is that good for us? Yes, it is, because it's 20 more than you might have had the year before. It's again, it's one of those tricky ones. Everything with legacies is really hard to put numbers on. It's such an open field, and it can change and vary year on year.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you. So any tips for running powerful legacy events and whether they can have the same impact online as well as face-to-face? Could it be wrapped up in events with other aims, or should it just be a standalone legacy event?
I think that the best events are thank you events for supporters. And I think they're wrapped up with, I think it's a segment during an event of some kind talking about gifting wills to the charity. So I think the best ones are, you have a group of supporters who might be people who've been regular givers for, I don't know, for a number of years or something. You invite them to an event. You can do this online a lot easier because it's a lot more accessible. But if you're an organization who has something to show that people can look at, then I think you've got a good position. You've got a good, you're in a good place basically to show people around and what work has done. And you can always say, this has been funded by Legacies, this has been done, this is what I would do. So you run it around to thank events. I think combining the events are probably good. Whether there's enough content specifically for a legacy event, it all depends on your organization and what your size is. I mean, I definitely know bigger charities can do proper legacy events, or some charities have legacy groups. And have legacy workshops and have like legacy, or what they call legacy circles and things like that, where they've had these legators or potential legators and stuff, where they get together in groups, they do things for them. But it's really up to you. I mean, events are always good for mentioning it, especially if you're backing off something else. It's that whole drip feed again, especially if you're starting from scratch. Drop it in nicely. Sometimes maybe get a solicitor to come along and talk about the will process and the will writing process. That could be a sole legacy event as well. And virtually that can work very well.
Fantastic. Thank you, David. And we're fast running out of time, so I think we've got time for maybe one more question, if that's okay. So would you recommend adapting messages by age groups of supporters and segmenting? And do you have any advice on approaching universities alumni if different to general supporters?
So could you just repeat that last part of the question again?
Yes, the last part was, do you have any advice on approaching university alumni if different to general supporters?
I think for most universities, university alumni would be your best port of call. And I don't think it necessarily matters what age group they are. I think if you're doing it for the first time, you're probably looking at over 50s. as the best group, because they're going to be starting to theoretically looking at a stage in their will where they're thinking about future retirement, and it's at a stage where they might have had grandkids at that point, so they might have done that, so they've been a slightly different life cycle. So they're the good starting points. You start them going on earlier, but alumni would definitely be your best port of call, I believe, for a university to start off with. But I don't think age necessarily matters, because yes, it would be different messaging, definitely. So if, I mean, you could even start as soon as long as students, as freshers, starting thinking about leaving a legacy. You're starting a university, do you know what? You need a will. Write a will. Everyone over the 18 should have a will, so you don't die intestate or something. You might have nothing to give, but you know what? You're away from home, you're this, that, and the other. What happens? You might have some assets and some things you want to take care of. So that would be one messaging. Then I think the real key messaging about what their gifts actually would do and stuff and things would be a bit further down the line, probably around sort of like 50 at a starting point, and then 70 plus would probably be the actual ones where you're most likely to get that gift coming through. So they would be a good target point for that.
Great, fantastic, David. Thank you very much. So unfortunately, I think that's all we've got time for now. So I'm going to hand over to Juliet. But David, thank you so much. Really appreciate all your time. And yeah, some really great questions there and great answers. So thank you very much.
Yeah, and I would echo that. Thank you so much, David. I can't believe how much we managed to cover in such a short period of time, and loads of really top tips and pragmatic advice. So massive thank you. So our next First Thursday will take place on June the 3rd, same time, 10 a.m, where we'll be focusing on trust with our expert panel who'll be answering questions on the challenges, changes and new innovative approaches that they've learned through the struggles of last year. So do join us, and in the meantime, stay safe and enjoy coming out of lockdown. See you soon. Bye.